No attire, no funds, no entry. Depart. The coffee shop attendant shouted as the individual retrieved his canvas sack and moved with a limp towards the exit. Onlookers observed, some with amusement, none offered assistance. Yet, at 8 a.m. the subsequent day, 5 military vehicles blockaded the street, and the man who had been ejected emerged in full military dress. Raymond Miller had not intended to visit the cafe. At 61, with a spine that served as a constant reminder of every mile marched and every soldier carried, he favored remaining unseen. However, the unexpected deluge had offered him scant alternative. The chic downtown cafe was the sole refuge within his restricted walking capability. He paused at the entrance, water cascading from his gray facial hair and ragged army outerwear. The aged canvas sack, its olive green faded and straps frayed, was a heavy burden on his shoulder. He paused, feeling instantly incongruous amidst the polished wooden tables and patrons engrossed in their laptops. The aroma of high-priced coffee and newly baked goods permeated the warm atmosphere, a stark juxtaposition to the frigid rain soaking through his worn footwear. Raymond inhaled deeply and stepped inside, cautiously selecting a diminutive corner table distant from most patrons. A youthful coffee shop attendant with fashionably arranged hair neared, observing Raymond's drenched state with poorly concealed contempt. "May I assist you?" His tone implied the contrary. "Merely some water, if you please," Raymond uttered softly. "Until the precipitation subsides." The attendant's eyebrows arched. "A minimum order is necessary for seating. This establishment is not a refuge." Raymond acknowledged with a nod, delving into his pocket with age-stiffened fingers. "I can afford a modest coffee in that case." He laid 3 creased dollar notes on the table, nearly half of his available funds. The attendant made no effort to collect the money. "That sum will not suffice for our premium coffee." His voice had escalated intentionally, loud enough for adjacent tables to overhear. "No order, no seat. This is not a refuge." The cafe had fallen quiet. Dialogue ceased as gazes shifted towards the dispute. Raymond sensed the burden of their stares, the same stares he had endured since coming home with injuries not apparent to the eye but persistently painful. "I comprehend," Raymond stated slowly, getting to his feet. "I shall simply wait externally beneath the covering." As he reached for his canvas sack, a well-dressed man at the neighboring table crinkled his nose and declared loudly, "He emits an odor. Can you not perceive it?" Laughter spread through the cafe. Raymond kept his eyes lowered, concentrating on collecting his bag, the bag that had been with him through 2 deployments, 3 surgical procedures, and numerous nights spent under bridges when his disability payments were insufficient to cover both medication and shelter. The coffee shop attendant moved from behind the counter, now overtly aggressive. "Sir, I must request your immediate departure. You are inconveniencing our patrons." Raymond offered no resistance. He never did. Disputes consumed energy he could not afford. He moved with a limp towards the exit, but the attendant was impatient. With a swift step, he grasped Raymond's elbow, pulling him towards the doorway. The abrupt motion caused Raymond to lose his balance. His canvas sack slipped, striking the ground with sufficient impact to scatter its contents. Among the meager possessions that spilled onto the polished concrete floor was a small mesh pouch containing an object that reflected the light, a purple heart medal, its characteristic form and purple-edged ribbon unmistakable. A woman at a nearby table observed it, her coffee cup halting midway to her lips. For an instant, an expression akin to recognition crossed her face, but she quickly averted her gaze, unwilling to become involved. The coffee shop attendant either failed to see it or was indifferent. He pushed the dispersed items back into the bag with the tip of his shoe and thrust it at Raymond. "Collect your belongings and depart." Raymond knelt with difficulty, retrieving the medal himself and carefully placing it back into the mesh pouch. His actions were deliberate, dignified despite the indignity. Not a single individual in the busy cafe extended a hand to help. As he stepped back into the torrential rain, clutching the Purple Heart inside his jacket to shield it from moisture, the cafe door shut behind him with a decisive sound. The precipitation showed no indication of ceasing. After 20 minutes of enduring the inadequate shelter of the awning, Raymond opted to attempt reaching the public park situated 2 blocks distant. At the very least, the covered structure there might provide superior protection. He proceeded at a slow pace along the thoroughfare, each movement a compromise between resolve and discomfort. The park was, thankfully, unoccupied. The rain had driven away the typical assembly. Raymond secured a dry section of the timbered gazebo and carefully deposited his duffel bag. Finally afforded privacy, he unfastened the bag and inspected its valued contents. The moisture had not breached the outer material, leaving his few articles dry. He retrieved the mesh pouch holding his Purple Heart, bestowed after a helicopter extraction went awry in Afghanistan. The metal captured the scant light filtering through the rain clouds, its purple core a striking contrast to the silver perimeter. Next, he took out a folded American flag encased in a plastic protective cover, the one that had adorned his closest companion's coffin before being given to a family who subsequently sent it to Raymond with a message. He would desire for you to possess this. You were more of a sibling to him than we ever were. At the base of the bag rested a worn photograph in an unadorned frame. 12 men in desert camouflage, arms interlocked around one another's shoulders, positioned before a transport helicopter. Raymond gently cleared dust from the glass with his thumb. Only 5 of those men had made it back home. Lastly, he took out an envelope containing the most recent communication from his daughter, Sophia. Their bond had been tense since his return. His post-traumatic stress disorder, her displeasure at his absence during her formative years, his incapacity to maintain consistent employment or residence. She sent monthly letters from her university residence in a different state, the correspondence formal yet regular. "Ray, is that yourself, Alpha 9? The voice took him by surprise. Raymond glanced upwards to observe a man in a time-worn coat nearing the gazebo, his personal items contained in a shopping cart parked in the vicinity. "Charlie." Raymond squinted, identifying a fellow veteran he had sometimes met at the VA hospital. Charlie ascended the gazebo steps, his own movements indicating similar injuries. "Assumed that was you. Been some time since the support assembly." Raymond acknowledged with a nod. He had ceased attending the weekly gatherings after losing his dwelling, too embarrassed to confess he had joined the population of homeless veterans despite all initiatives supposedly created to prevent such an outcome. "Are you still residing with your daughter?" Charlie inquired, settling onto the bench with a groan that conveyed familiar discomforts. "No," Raymond conceded. "She is currently at university, performing well." "Is she aware of—" Charlie gestured ambiguously at the duffel bag and Raymond's evident circumstances. "No, and she will not be." Raymond's tone was firm, allowing no debate. "She is finally making progress, establishing her own existence. I refuse to be a liability to her." Charlie nodded with comprehension. Many of them made comparable decisions, shielding their loved ones from the harsh truth of their situations post-service. On his telephone, an ancient flip model retained solely for urgent situations, a notification illuminated the diminutive screen. Something concerning a widely circulated video. Raymond seldom checked social media, but ennui and the desire to divert his attention from the persistent ache in his back prevailed. He opened the hyperlink to find himself viewing his own humiliation. Someone in the cafe had recorded his ejection, adding derisive commentary. The caption stated, "Homeless veteran drama. Watch this freeloader get served." It had already garnered thousands of views and vitriolic comments, questioning whether he was even a genuine veteran. Across town, in a comfortable suburban residence, a man named David Harrison idly scrolled through his phone during a tedious conference call. The video algorithm suggested homeless veteran drama and he clicked out of casual interest. The color drained from his face as he recognized the man being escorted from the cafe. "Sergeant Miller," he whispered, abruptly rising and exiting the meeting, leaving bewildered colleagues staring in his wake. David Harrison had never forgotten the sergeant who had transported him 2 miles through mountainous terrain after an improvised explosive device destroyed their vehicle and shattered David's leg. The same sergeant who had then returned for 3 more wounded men despite his own injuries, the sergeant whose spine had been permanently impaired in the process, a fact military medical personnel had attempted to minimize when processing his discharge. David's hands trembled as he dialed a number he had not called in years. "Marcus, it's David. Have you seen what they did to Sergeant Miller?" By nightfall, the video had been disseminated within private veterans associations nationwide, provoking a vastly different response than the public derision. Telephones illuminated, messages were exchanged, strategies were formulated. And Raymond, oblivious to the impending uproar, passed the night on a park bench, his duffel bag functioning as both a cushion and a security measure, the Purple Heart nestled against his chest like a protective charm. He never solicited alms. He never raised his voice. He simply departed, a medal in his pocket and rain in his footwear. Daybreak arrived over the urban landscape with unforeseen lucidity following the preceding day's deluge. Raymond roused with the sun, a practice ingrained since his initial military training decades prior. His physique protested each motion, the damp conditions having permeated his joints during the night. He utilized the park's public facilities to cleanse his face and brush his teeth, preserving what dignity he could with restricted means. Years of military discipline were evident in the manner he folded his scant belongings and systematically repacked his duffel bag. In the cafe situated opposite the park, the morning shift was commencing. The identical barista from the previous day was arranging outdoor tables, whistling as he positioned chairs, with no recollection of the elderly gentleman he had humiliated. The initial patrons began to arrive, ordering intricate coffee concoctions and browsing their phones while awaiting their orders. No one observed the initial military vehicle until it navigated onto the street and halted directly before the cafe, its diesel engine's reverberation sufficiently loud to cause the establishment's windows to shake. A second vehicle materialized from the opposing direction, followed by a third. Within moments, 5 Army transport conveyances had effectively cordoned off the entire block. Pedestrians paused in bewilderment. Cafe patrons pressed against the windows. The barista stood motionless, coffee pot in hand, as uniformed men and women started to disembark from the vehicles. They were not on active duty, that was evident from their age range and the assortment of their uniforms. Some were clad in desert camouflage from campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. Others wore older battle dress uniforms from previous conflicts. Each uniform displayed combat insignia, unit emblems, and rows of ribbons that narrated tales of service and sacrifice. Leading them was Lieutenant Colonel Carla Rodriguez. Her salt and pepper hair was secured in a taut bun, her uniform flawless despite being a decade removed from active service. She moved with the self-assured authority of one accustomed to leadership. "Attention," she commanded, and 50 veterans instantly assumed a perfect formation on the sidewalk, creating a line that spanned the length of the block. Customers emerged from the cafe and adjacent businesses, their phones raised to capture the unforeseen military exhibition. Amidst the congregating onlookers stood Raymond, drawn from the park by the disturbance, his expressions transitioning from bewilderment to acknowledgement as he identified familiar countenances in the formation. Colonel Rodriguez advanced, her voice distinct and authoritative as she spoke to the now silent observers. "Yesterday at this establishment, a man was publicly humiliated and expelled due to his appearance. That man," she indicated directly at Raymond in the crowd, "is Sergeant First Class Raymond Miller, former leader of Alpha 9 Rescue Team, 10th Mountain Division." Murmurs spread through the onlookers. The barista who had ejected Raymond visibly blanched. "This cafe," Colonel Rodriguez proceeded, her voice carrying down the block, "turned away a man who once carried 4 injured soldiers on his back through hostile territory under enemy fire after their vehicle was struck by an IED. A man who refused evacuation until every member of his team was accounted for, resulting in permanent spinal damage that the VA still hasn't properly addressed. She motioned, and two veterans stepped forward carrying a large wooden sign which they positioned directly in front of the cafe entrance. "This place refused a hero. We remember." The crowd had fallen silent, many lowering their phones as the gravity of what they were witnessing became apparent. The barista pushed through the door, his face flushed with embarrassment. "I didn't know," he stammered. "How could I know?" He didn't say anything about being a veteran. Colonel Rodriguez regarded him with unwavering look. "That is precisely the issue, young man. True heroes seldom declare themselves. They do not display their decorations ostentatiously. They bear their suffering in private and anticipate nothing." From the rear of the crowd, Raymond advanced with a limp. The veterans instantly made way, creating a passage for him. Despite his worn attire and unshaven countenance, there was a dignity in his bearing that elicited respect. "This is not required," he stated quietly to Colonel Rodriguez. "I am not deserving of all this disruption." "With all due respect, Sergeant," she retorted audibly enough for all to hear, "you do not have the authority to determine your value to us." The barista neared Raymond, visibly trembling. "Sir, I am profoundly sorry for my treatment of you. Had I been aware?" Raymond interrupted him with a raised hand. "Offer no apologies to me," he stated, his voice raspy yet clear. "Apologize to the uniform. Apologize to every individual who has ever worn it, whether you perceive it or not." David Harrison stepped forward from the formation, moving on a prosthetic leg concealed beneath his formal trousers. "Sergeant Miller saved my life," he announced to the crowd. "I was a 20-year-old youth losing blood in the mountains. He transported me for 2 miles with an injured spine. Then he returned for 3 more of us." One by one, other veterans came forward to share their narratives, not all directly involving Raymond, but all emphasizing the unseen connections that linked those who had served and the invisible injuries many of them brought home. Inside the cafe, staff members were hastily taking down the "No shirt, no service" sign from the window. The manager appeared, offering complimentary coffee to all veterans present. Colonel Rodriguez declined with politeness but firmness. "We did not come for coffee or apologies," she stated. "We came because when one of us is treated with disrespect, all of us are, and because too many of our brothers and sisters have become invisible after removing their uniforms." By noon, the military vehicles had departed, yet the influence of their presence persisted. Raymond found himself encircled by past comrades in arms, each insisting on providing assistance in some manner. His duffel bag was placed into David's automobile as arrangements were made to recover his remaining belongings from the storage facility he could no longer afford. And across the internet, the public perception was already changing. The derisive video had been eclipsed by footage of the veterans' response, accompanied by hashtags such as #RespectTheUniform and #InvisibleHeroes. A week thereafter, the cafe had experienced a metamorphosis, both in its physical appearance and its guiding principles. A new placard was prominently displayed in the window. "Respect all. Inquire before you judge." Staff members participated in sensitivity instruction, and a lasting discount initiative was implemented for veterans and emergency personnel. Raymond himself never revisited the establishment, despite numerous invitations and personal expressions of regret from the proprietor. He favored the quiet dignity of progressing rather than dwelling on past humiliation. The dwelling David and the others had secured for him was unassuming yet tidy. A single-bedroom unit in a mixed-income structure, equipped with an elevator that spared his injured spine the strain of stairs. For the initial occasion in 18 months, Raymond rested in an actual bed, with a door he could shut and a refrigerator holding food he had not scavenged. He still found it challenging to accept assistance. Decades of self-sufficiency and the military's emphasis on fortitude made vulnerability seem like a failing. Yet, each morning, a different veteran would materialize in the building's entrance hall. Some he recognized from service, others linked solely by the camaraderie of the uniform, insisting on sharing a morning meal or providing transport to VA appointments. The cafe, in the meantime, had unexpectedly transformed into a site of pilgrimage. Veterans from throughout the city made it a practice to visit daily, ordering coffee and occupying the identical corner table where Raymond had been denied service. They never directly mentioned the incident. They merely occupied the space, a quiet testament that their presence persisted even when unacknowledged. On this specific morning, A young father and his son, approximately 7 years of age, were seated near a group of 3 veterans. The boy observed with undisguised inquisitiveness as the men exchanged a salute before taking their seats. "Father?" the boy inquired audibly enough for adjacent tables to perceive. "For what reason do they salute when no flag is present?" The father contemplated his response with care, mindful of the listening veterans. "At times," he eventually answered, "an individual embodies the flag." The veterans nodded in agreement, and one offered the boy a slight smile. Perhaps the initial occasion he had smiled in public since returning from his final deployment. Across town, Raymond sat in the small park near his new apartment, methodically sorting through mail forwarded from various temporary addresses. Among the official VA correspondence and bills was a handwritten envelope bearing his daughter's familiar script. He opened it carefully, unfolding 2 pages covered in Sophia's neat handwriting. "Dear Dad, I saw what happened online, the video from the cafe and then the veterans showing up. I recognized you immediately. Why didn't you tell me things had gotten so bad? All these months of letters and you never said you were homeless. You wrote about moving around and exploring different neighborhoods, and I believed you were okay. I've withdrawn from classes for the semester. Don't be angry. I can re-enroll later. I'm coming home next week. You're not alone, Dad. You never were. All those years I was angry that you weren't there for my childhood. I understand better now what you were carrying, what you're still carrying. Let me help share the weight. I love you, Sophia." Raymond perused the letter twice, then meticulously refolded it into its envelope. For the initial occasion since the incident, emotion breached his carefully preserved composure. A solitary tear traced a path down his weathered cheek before he swiftly wiped it away. His telephone rang. The old flip model he still favored over the smartphone David had attempted to provide. It was Colonel Rodriguez, checking in as she did every few days. "Rodriguez, the housing is more than sufficient," Raymond stated without preamble. "You need not persist in calling." "That is not the purpose of my call, Sergeant," she answered. "The mayor's office has made contact. They wish to create a veteran support initiative, permanent housing aid, employment prospects tailored for combat-related disabilities, the complete package. They require consultants who comprehend the genuine difficulties." "Sounds excellent," Raymond remarked with caution. "Best of luck with that. They are offering compensated roles. I put your name forward." Raymond commenced his refusal, his reflexive reaction to any type underscore of assistance. "Before you decline," Rodriguez went on, "reflect on this. How many others remain out there? How many will not have 50 veterans materialize to advocate for them? This is no longer solely about you, Sergeant. This concerns all of them." The park had become populated with children dismissed from a nearby elementary school. Raymond observed their play, oblivious to the intricacies of the adult world that lay ahead. "My daughter is returning home," he stated at last. "That is welcome news," Rodriguez answered. "Bring her to the assembly. Allow her to witness what her father is constructing." That evening, as the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Raymond placed a call to his daughter, the first time he had initiated contact in years. "I am looking forward to seeing you," he said when she answered. "And I believe I may have found something useful to do around here." In the cafe across town, the evening shift was ending. The barista who had ejected Raymond was cleaning tables when an elderly man in a worn jacket entered. The barista tensed, his new training warring with old instincts. But before he could react, one of the regular veterans stood up and approached the newcomer. "Vietnam?" the veteran asked, noticing a pin on the man's jacket. The elderly man nodded. "Join us," the veteran said, gesturing to their table. "Coffee's on me." The barista watched the interaction, then quietly brought over a fresh pot without being asked. The lesson had been learned not through sensitivity training or new policies, but through witnessing the unbreakable bonds between those who had served, regardless of when or where. Outside, as darkness fell, the city continued its normal rhythm. But in small ways, change was happening. The invisible were becoming visible. The forgotten were being remembered. And Raymond Miller, preparing his apartment for his daughter's arrival, finally unpacked his duffel bag completely, placing his Purple Heart on the bedside table where he could see it, a reminder not of past pain, but of present worth. Some people wear their medals on their chest. Others keep them in their pockets because the world stopped looking. But when one person stands up, a whole army might follow.